The first time the sky opened, people thought it was a meteor shower that had learned manners. There was no impact, no shockwave, no screaming emergency alerts that usually accompanied anything falling from orbit. Instead, the atmosphere simply paused. Clouds held still like they had forgotten their job. Birds stopped mid-flight in the awkward way someone freezes when they realize they've walked into the wrong meeting. Then the objects descended, sleek, pale constructs shaped like something between architecture and biology, drifting down as if gravity had been politely asked to cooperate. Every broadcast channel on Earth flickered at the same time. Even the ones that were supposed to be disconnected. Even the ones that had been definitely unplugged for safety reasons by governments years ago. A voice filled the world, translated instantly into every language, including the ones humans had invented purely to confuse language models. We are here to optimize stability. Someone in a basement bunker in Buenos Aires immediately whispered, "That sounds like bad news in corporate vocabulary." The ships did not land in the dramatic sense. They unfolded themselves into existing infrastructure, empty stadiums, deserts, offshore platforms, parking lots of abandoned shopping malls. It was less an invasion and more like the universe had decided to rearrange furniture while humanity was still sitting on it. And then came the disarmament. It started politely. All firearm systems were rendered inoperative simultaneously, not by explosion or sabotage, but by a soft electromagnetic override that made every trigger mechanism feel suddenly unnecessary. Guns didn't break, they simply refused to function like employees who had decided to resign emotionally before submitting paperwork. Military analysts called it impossible. Civil engineers called it insulting. A retired general called it the quietest humiliation I have ever experienced, and I once lost a war to a logistics error. The aliens did not confiscate weapons at first, that would have been too theatrical. Instead, they offered storage, orbital vaults, atmospheric depots, secure containment fields with reassuring names like Peace Repository Unit 1. Humanity, still assuming this might be some elaborate diplomatic misunderstanding, complied in uneven waves. Some countries resisted for about 6 hours. One small nation resisted for 9, mostly because their communications officer fell asleep during the compliance briefing, and nobody wanted to wake him because he looked peaceful for the first time in years. By the end of the week, guns were gone from Earth's surface. Not destroyed, just removed, like tools borrowed by a very confident neighbor. What remained was silence, paperwork, and an uncomfortable amount of free time. That was when the boredom started. Boredom is dangerous in a species that once invented fireworks just to see what would happen. The alien governance structure, officially titled the Harmonized Oversight Lattice, though humans immediately shortened it to the overly polite occupation, did not anticipate this. Their models predicted rebellion, despair, maybe even coordinated sabotage. What they did not account for was humans reorganizing their frustration into hobbies. The first illegal activity discovered post-disarmament was competitive spoon carving. The second was underground racing involving modified delivery drones and cats wearing sensor harnesses. The third, which concerned them slightly more, was archery. At first, it was harmless, recreational, historical reenactment groups dusting off old equipment, clubs reopening storage rooms that smelled like forgotten wood and nostalgia. The aliens monitored it casually, classifying it under low-threat cultural regression. Then arrows started hitting surveillance drones, not many at first, 1, then 3. Then a pattern that made alien analysts stop mid-sentence and request clarification from physics. The arrows were not primitive. That was the mistake in classification. They were engineered composites, carbon layered with adaptive tension cores, designed to compensate for atmospheric interference fields that the aliens had assumed would make all projectile weapons irrelevant. Someone had looked at a 1,000-year-old weapon design and asked, with disturbing calm, "What if this, but inconvenient for spaceborne intelligence?" And then built it, on the ground, in warehouses that officially didn't exist. In one of those warehouses, a man was arguing about arrow balance ratios like it was a matter of national dignity. He was not particularly tall, not particularly dramatic. He did not look like someone who would cause orbital defense systems to file complaints. If anything, he looked like someone who would politely return a borrowed screwdriver and apologize for the delay. He was currently explaining to 3 engineers why their latest prototype was too emotionally unstable in crosswind conditions. One engineer blinked. Arrows don't have emotions. They do, he replied calmly. They just express them by missing. Nobody argued after that, not because it made sense, but because it sounded like it might be true in a way they didn't want to investigate too deeply. Above them, unseen by most humans, the alien commander responsible for Earth stabilization reviewed early anomaly reports. She had long ears, slender, slightly curved, subtly expressive in a way that made her emotions occasionally more honest than her official reports. They twitched now, not in alarm exactly, but in a pattern that suggested mild intellectual irritation. She had read through 12 incidents involving unidentified high-velocity wooden projectiles disabling orbital observation units. Wooden was a generous term. The material composition reports made no sense. One analyst had written this violates expectation frameworks in the margin, which was not helpful but emotionally satisfying. She watched the footage again. An arrow traveling upward through a disrupted electromagnetic field, adjusting its trajectory mid-flight by mechanisms that should not exist, striking a sensor node with surgical precision. Then another. Then silence. She leaned back slightly, her ears flicked once. Are they adapting backward? She asked. No one answered because nobody had a definition for that phrase that didn't sound insulting to physics. On Earth, the strategist was already moving through cities that no longer quite knew what they were for. He treated checkpoints like weather patterns, sometimes present, sometimes absent, always slightly annoying. He carried no firearm, of course. Nobody did. Instead, he carried a compact bow assembly that folded into something that looked suspiciously like a musical instrument case. At one checkpoint, an alien enforcement drone scanned him and paused. You are carrying a recreational artifact, it stated. It's for stress relief, he replied. That is not its primary function. That depends on the stress, he said politely. The drone processed this for a long moment, then let him pass, because its behavioral subroutine did not include argue with humans who sound like they might be correct in ways that are not in the manual. By the time night arrived, Earth's cities had developed a new rhythm. Not resistance yet, not war, something in between. A kind of collective improvisation where humans learned which systems were watching, which systems were bored, and which systems could be tricked by small acts of absurdity. Somewhere, a surveillance tower was hit by an arrow carrying a note that simply read, "Return to sender." The alien command structure flagged it as hostile communication. Humans, upon hearing this, considered it the funniest thing they had heard all week. And in orbit, the long-eared commander found herself staring at the incident report longer than necessary, wondering why a message like that felt less like a threat and more like a punchline she had missed the setup for. The first confirmed incident that changed the classification of Earth did not look impressive on paper. A supply drone, Model V7 Orbital Logistics Unit, had been flying a routine path over what was once Central Europe and was now designated Compliance Sector 3B. Its sensors recorded nothing unusual until the moment it stopped existing in a very specific, humiliating way. Not destroyed, not disabled, but interrupted mid-function by a projectile that should not have been able to reach it. The drone's last transmitted data packet contained a single line of diagnostic confusion. Impact source, non-compliant physics. The alien command center did not like that phrase. It sounded like sarcasm from the universe itself. The long-eared commander stood in the observation chamber as holographic reconstruction replayed the event again and again. Her ears twitched in a slow, irritated rhythm, the kind that suggested she was trying very hard not to ask the obvious question out loud. Around her, analysts argued in tones that were becoming increasingly less confident. It's a kinetic object, one said. It's an ancient kinetic object, another corrected. It is behaving like a guided system, a third added reluctantly. That is not possible without active propulsion or field assistance, someone else muttered. The commander raised a hand slightly and the room quieted. Show me the trajectory correction, she said. The hologram complied. A thin line of light traced the arrow's path upward through atmospheric interference layers, bending subtly at points where electromagnetic distortion fields should have rendered it unstable. Instead of destabilizing, it adapted. Not dramatically, not like a machine recalculating, more like something stubborn refusing to be told no. The commander leaned forward, her ears twitched twice. That, she said carefully, is not a primitive weapon. No one contradicted her, this was progress in itself. On the surface, humans were having a significantly less formal discussion about the same event. The strategist was sitting on an overturned maintenance crate while three engineers argued around him. One of them was waving a tablet covered in graphs that looked increasingly offended at being used for this topic. This is impossible, the engineer insisted. The strategist nodded, yes. That arrow curved through a field interference zone designed to destabilize any solid object larger than a dust particle. Yes. And it still hit a moving target at orbital altitude. Yes. The engineer blinked. Do you understand what you're agreeing to? The strategist considered this. I think I'm agreeing that your field interference zone is less emotionally convincing than you hoped. Another engineer laughed despite herself. Emotionally convincing. It didn't believe in itself, he said. That sentence was not helpful scientifically, but it was unsettlingly accurate in a way nobody wanted to unpack. A younger technician raised a hand. We're calling it the bow problem. That sounds like a dental issue, someone else said immediately. It is a strategic issue, the technician corrected, the strategist sighed. Please don't name it like a medical condition, it makes it feel incurable. It might be, the engineer muttered. That was when the first field report arrived from Sector 3B, the drone incident. They watched the playback together. The room went quiet in a way that suggested collective regret for not having taken naps instead of careers in defense engineering. The arrow was simple. That was the problem. It didn't glow. It didn't phase. It didn't announce itself. It just existed in motion with enough precision to make advanced alien sensor systems feel personally insulted. The strategist leaned forward slightly. That's good work, he said. You're complimenting it? Someone asked. I'm complimenting the person who built it, he corrected. The arrow is just doing its job. Which is, the technician asked. Winning an argument with physics, he said. No one laughed this time. It had stopped being funny in a comfortable way and started being funny in the way a falling elevator is funny right before impact. Above them, orbiting structures adjusted their defensive protocols. Not out of panic, but out of curiosity, the kind of curiosity that precedes either innovation or catastrophe depending on mood. The alien commander requested a direct surface assessment. This was unusual. High-ranking overseers did not typically engage with ground-level anomalies unless they had already escalated into something requiring formal disappointment. She descended in a controlled transit capsule that resembled a drop of light falling through layers of atmosphere that did not quite agree with its presence. When she arrived, she did not land in a military base or a city center. She chose a neutral observation site that had once been a subway junction and now functioned as an unofficial exchange point between human resistance groups and alien monitoring units, who pretended not to notice them exchanging supplies labeled historical artifacts, and definitely not weapons. The strategist was already there when she arrived. He looked up at her as if she were late to a meeting he had not scheduled. Her long ears tilted slightly as she observed him, not hostile, not warm, analytical. You are the one coordinating the pattern disruptions, she said. I prefer organized inconvenience, he replied. That is not a recognized military term. We're not very big on recognized military terms anymore. Pause. Somewhere in the tunnel, a drip of water echoed like a slow countdown no one had agreed to start. She looked past him at the human activity behind. Engineers, scouts, archers adjusting equipment that looked simultaneously ancient and disturbingly advanced. You removed your own primary ranged weapons, she said. Yes. And replaced them with slower ones. Yes. Why? He smiled slightly, because you took away the fast ones. That answer should have been absurd. It was not. It was structurally complete. Her ears twitched once, sharper this time. You are compensating, she said. We're improvising, he corrected. That is not a stable strategy. It's worked so far. That was the moment she began to understand the problem was not the weapons. It was the thinking behind them. On the surface, another test occurred. A standard enforcement drone descended into a controlled zone, projecting compliance signals and mild psychological discouragement fields. Humans were expected to disperse. Instead, they did something that made the drone's threat assessment algorithm briefly display the equivalent of confusion. They held a small festival. Music, lights, and what appeared to be competitive archery, but with rules that changed mid-game depending on audience reaction. Someone had tied reflective strips to arrows purely for dramatic effect, which was not a recognized tactical parameter but somehow made targeting more difficult. The drone attempted to classify the event as non-threatening. Then an arrow struck its sensor array with perfect timing, followed by a second that attached a small flag reading, "Thanks for visiting." The drone reported back, "Hostile humor detected." That phrase would later be debated in 3 separate command discussions. In orbit, the commander watched the replay again. Her assistant spoke cautiously, "They are mocking our presence." She did not respond immediately. Her ears moved slightly, not in irritation now, but something closer to reluctant acknowledgement. "Or," she said finally, "they are redefining it." That distinction changed everything in the room without anyone admitting it out loud. Because mockery could be suppressed, redefinition could not. Back on the surface, the strategist packed his bow assembly while listening to distant reports of increasing drone hesitation. He paused briefly when a younger recruit approached. "Are we winning?" the recruit asked. The strategist considered the question seriously, as if it had weight beyond morale. "We're being noticed," he said. "That's not an answer. It's the only part that matters right now." The recruit frowned. "That sounds like something aliens would say." "Good," he replied. "It means we're learning the language." Above them, unseen, the long-eared commander reviewed Earth's file again. The classification status flickered between stable occupation and adaptive anomaly. Neither felt correct anymore. She closed the report. Her ears twitched once, slower now, and for the first time since arrival she did not immediately open a new one. The decision to classify Earth as contained was made in orbit during a meeting that lasted exactly 17 minutes longer than anyone intended. The extra 17 minutes were caused by silence. Not tactical silence. Not procedural silence. The kind of silence that happens when a system has run out of confident language. The long-eared commander stood at the center of the chamber, while projections of Earth's surface flickered around her. Archery strikes on drones, disrupted patrol patterns, festivals held under surveillance beams that kept failing to decide whether they were observing a rebellion or attending it. Her ears moved in small, restrained motions, as if they were trying to interpret data faster than her mind allowed. A senior analyst spoke first. "The resistance has expanded beyond projected containment thresholds." Another added, "They are now coordinating without detectable centralized command nodes." A third hesitated, "They appear to be enjoying it." That last word caused a brief pause in the room. "Define enjoying," the commander said. The analyst adjusted the projection. A human settlement appeared, lights strung across rooftops, improvised wind structures spinning softly in the night, and arrows embedded in distant signal towers like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence no one had written permission to send. "They are treating engagement events as cultural gatherings," the analyst said. "There is documented humor during active defensive exchanges." The technician muttered, "That is not in the conflict handbook." The commander's ears tilted slightly. "Neither is their method of projectile guidance." The strategist had stopped calling it war weeks ago. On the surface, he stood in what had once been a transport hub and was now something between a workshop, a rumor center, and a place where people argued about arrowhead resonance patterns as if they were debating philosophy. He listened to reports coming in through scattered relay nodes, drone hesitations, orbital recalibrations, and one particularly confusing incident involving a surveillance unit that had paused mid-assault pattern to reorient itself toward a group of archers who were applauding its arrival. "They're learning audience participation," one of the engineers said. "That's not a tactical category," someone else replied. "It is now," the strategist said. He was not smiling as often anymore. Not because he had lost humor, but because humor had become part of the infrastructure. It lived in supply routes, in misdirection patterns, in the way humans treated impossible constraints like suggestions rather than rules. A recruit approached him. "Orbital Command sent another compliance message," the recruit said. He accepted the data shard and read it. The message was simple: surrender remains the optimal outcome. He handed it back. They're repeating themselves. Is that good? The recruit asked. It means they're still assuming we're listening the same way, he said. Above them, the alien commander watched the same message responses. Her long ears flicked once as she observed something she had not reported yet. Every human counteraction contained variability that did not degrade under repetition. Instead, it improved, like curiosity being used as fuel. She finally requested a surface meeting without protocol clearance. This caused mild panic in 3 departments and existential confusion in 2 others. When she descended, it was without escort. The transit capsule landed at the same neutral junction as before. The strategist was already there again, which no one admitted was starting to feel intentional on his part. You stopped escalating, she said as she stepped out. We changed definitions, he replied. That is escalation, she said. Only if you're attached to your definitions. A pause. In the distance, something mechanical moved through old tunnels, recalibrating itself around human presence rather than removing it. The sound was less threatening now, more uncertain. The commander studied him. Your systems are not obeying predictable suppression models. They're not systems, he said. They're people. Systems are just what we call them when we want them to behave. Her ears moved slightly. And what do you want them to do? He looked past her toward the unseen layers of orbit and surveillance and protocols that had once felt immovable. Survive, he said simply. Preferably with enough personality left to argue about it afterward. That answer did not fit any military classification. That was becoming a pattern. A distant signal interrupted them, orbital command requesting immediate compliance escalation review. The commander did not respond right away. Instead, she did something no one expected from her rank. She asked a question without data backing it. Why bows? The strategist exhaled lightly, because they assumed we couldn't upgrade them. That is not efficient reasoning. No, he agreed. It's emotional reasoning disguised as engineering. Her ears twitched again, slower now. That should be unstable. It is, he said. That's why it works. The silence followed. Not the uncomfortable kind this time, something closer to recalculation. In orbit, the governing lattice attempted to finalize Earth's status update. The classification interface flickered between options. Suppressed, unstable, hostile, anomalous, irrelevant. None of them fit. A junior systems officer finally said what no one wanted to formalize. They are not behaving like a conquered population. The commander on the surface closed her eyes briefly as if acknowledging a truth that had already arrived too quietly to stop. They never were, she said. That sentence, transmitted upward, caused a cascade of reinterpretation protocols that would take weeks to resolve. On Earth, the resistance did not celebrate. They adjusted. That was the difference the strategist had been pushing toward without naming it. No victory speeches, no collapse of